In this video, I'll be making a cake with a chicken sitting in a nesting box. Started off with mixing up my batter, and I used a cupcake. I used two 9x13 pans. I also used two 8-inch pans as well. Here you see me coloring the fondant that I'll be using to make the feathers for on the chicken. I used red, blue, and yellow food coloring, gel food coloring, to color this fondant. You'll notice that I made 4 different colors of feathers. I made a darker color, which is this one you're looking at now. I also made a medium color brown, a lighter brown, and white. You'll see feathers of all of those 4 colors in the final product. Here I'm rolling out the fondant so that I can make some stamped feathers. I used leaf cutouts, and I used 2 different sizes of leaves to cut out these feathers. Here I'm just beginning to take out the cutouts so that I can begin to draw the designs using a fondant tool onto each one. I'm using an X-Acto knife here, and I'm just kind of drawing little slits into the sides of each one of the feathers. And I do this for all 4 of the colors, the dark, medium, light browns, and also the white feathers. And you'll notice there's 2 different sizes there. Here I am brushing a little bit of Crisco on each one to get the excess powdered sugar off of each one so that they shine up a bit for use. I did these a few days in advance, so I was able to put these into a Ziploc bag and store them until I was ready to apply them to the finished product. This is that lighter brown or medium brown color compared to the one in the previous clip. Here's what the feathers each look like. Now I'm using an extruder because I'm making some hay or straw to be used in the nest of the nesting box. I did this in several different colors, but ultimately I ended up using only one color for the final product. Take some arm strength to do this, so this is quite the process. As it was coming out, I just cut this into some smaller pieces, and then again I did this early so that I could store this and use this once I needed on the day of. Here I'm beginning to make the brown icing, again using red, yellow, and blue to make the color of the box that the chicken will sit on. And I just added colors until it got to the color that I was looking for. That was a bit too blue, so I needed to add some red and yellow to bring out the brown in this. Here I'm cutting that 9x13 pan down so that it's a square size and will fit on this 12-inch cake board. And this particular person wanted extra icing, so I did not make these cakes flat. Instead, I just left them as is with a bit of a dome on the cake so that I would need additional icing to fill in the gaps on the sides, and that was to satisfy the person who was getting this cake. Now I'm beginning to stack this, putting a bit of buttercream onto the board so that it doesn't slide as I'm working with it. As I mentioned, I left the dome on these cakes so that there was excess icing for this individual. Now I'm adding that second layer, and I'll continue on with doing the crumb coat for this cake. Here I'm breaking up the pieces that I cut off that last cake because I'll be using this for cake pops to make the eggs later in the process. And I'm going to mix in some icing here to hold that together. And once that's done, I will put that in the refrigerator until I am ready to use it to make the cake pops. Here I am leveling these cakes because I want them to sit flat for the chicken portion of this. You'll see this is the strawberry cake that I referenced earlier. I'm adding some icing to the cake board. You'll see that it's a smaller board because this will ultimately be stacked on top of the nesting box, and I will want to keep this, and I don't want it to show in the final product. So I'm beginning to stack this cake, filling it with some buttercream icing, again using plenty for this individual for this cake. And I'm adding that second layer, leaving the bottom of the cake on top so that it's a flat surface. I'm pressing that down to get any air bubbles out, and I'm going to move on with doing the remainder of this crumb coat. In between working with the box and this chicken, I am chilling the cake so that I can continue working on the next one, and that of course makes it a little bit easier to work with each one when I come back to it. As I mentioned, I'm doing the crumb coat here, just kind of trying to smooth that out pretty good. Doesn't have to be perfect because this cake will be carved into the chicken. Using a bench scraper to smooth it out a bit. And using this icing knife to pull that back in to smooth out the top. Now I'm using that nesting box, and I'm cutting a bit out of the top, just maybe 1/2 inch, And that's so that when I put the chicken on top, it looks like the chicken is actually sitting into the box. I just want to do that from a visual perspective. Now I'm filling in that space, just covering it with a crumb coat so that none of that cake comes up, and so that it's an iced cake when they get to that portion of the cake. Now I'm beginning to carve the strawberry cake into my chicken. I'm cutting a bit out of the center here. That's going to be the indentation. This is the way I'm looking at it right now. Well, the way it just was is from the side. This is from the front or back. I'm just going to let this clip play so that you can see how exactly I did the carving for this cake. I used some of those scraps to build up the tail of the chicken. And at the front, I'm going to use one cupcake to create the neck of the chicken. You'll see these pieces are already iced because they were the pieces I cut out from the center. See, there's where I put the cupcake on, and I'm just going to ice that as well. Just kind of bringing that icing down kind of at an angle to make it look like the neck of the chicken. I'm also now doing the crumb coat on that place where I did some of the cutout. Now I'm just adding some additional icing here to make that neck a little bit thicker to really go along with the shape of the cake and the chicken shape. You'll see here I'm cutting a bit off of the sides to get more of that sleek shape of a chicken. I'll do that to both sides just to fix that shape a bit. And I'll cover in and put a crumb coat onto that portion where I just cut off. As I was looking at this, I kept seeing little spots that I felt like needed to be refined a bit, and so that's why you see me continually cutting and then filling and cutting and filling. Now I'm going in at the bottom of the chicken and I'm cutting in a bit at each part of the bottom, and that is really so that it fits that kind of shape of the chicken, so it's not just a straight down view. It will also fit nicely into that space that we cut out of the nesting box. This just gives it more of that chicken shape. Now I'm adding the next layer of icing to the nesting box, and then I'll smooth that out accordingly. Here you see me beginning the reinforcement so that when I put the chicken onto this nest, it won't fall in. So I'm putting 4 different supports into this that will hold that chicken up. Then I'm going to add some additional icing here so that when I put the board down, it sticks well to the cake. And now I'm going on and I'm putting the additional coat of icing onto the chicken, and I'll smooth that out pretty good. At this point we have the final shape of the chicken in place. This doesn't have to be super smooth because it will be covered in fondant feathers. So all of that will be masked by fondant. Here I am making a small Rice Krispie so that I can create the duck's head that's not too heavy. So I'm going to make the head and then I will wrap it in fondant before being placed. And I apologize, you can't see all of this. I was a little bit too close to the camera. I'm using that dark brown color from the feathers earlier to cover the head. Since there's some excess here on the area where I cinched it together, I'm going to cut that part out. And then I'll press that down to meet all the pieces of fondant together so it's covered fully. And there's my chicken head. Now I'm brushing some Crisco onto this to bring out the shine and give it a little bit of sleekness to it so it doesn't have all that powdered sugar on it. Cutting out this circle so that I can put this on the neck of the chicken. I'm just going to push that down so that it's rested against the cake. Using some Crisco to again rub over top of that to get off the powdered sugar. Here I am rolling out the fondant so that I can put that on the chest and a bit of the back of the chicken for areas where I decide not to add feathers. I'll cut the excess off of that and kind of tuck it underneath our chicken. I'm meeting those two edges from the front and side panels of fondant that I placed. And again, getting that excess powdered sugar off of the fondant. Beginning now to apply the feathers. I'm using the darker colored feathers up towards the neck. And as I move to the back, I will begin using the other three colors, the medium brown, the light brown, and the white. And periodically I'll mix those colors up just a little bit. Not sure why I'm losing focus here. I apologize for that. I mentioned that I was using two different sizes of feathers, bigger and smaller feathers. So I use the bigger feathers first, and then I use the smaller ones for the lower areas. Here it's a little further along in the process. You'll see I have the dark, the medium, and the light brown with some occasional mixed up of the colors. As it gets to the back of the duck, it's more of a lighter colored chicken. And as you see, I left that front portion of its chest without feathers. I'm using piping gel to place each one of these feathers so that they stay in place. And this is what it looks like with the feathers on. I am going to go back in and add feathers to the very top at its neck, so that when I put its head on, you don't see any non-feathered area. You can see here it's already done with the feathers at the neck. And now I am adding its head. So I added a, a dowel with a point, and I placed his head onto that point. I did put some piping gel, or I will put some piping gel underneath his head to help to hold that securely into place. And here's where I'll add that piping gel to help hold it. Now I'm adding a heart that I had previously cut out for its face details. You'll see I begin to add some of the other details as well, including on top of its head and under his chin, and as well as his beak. So I put a little toothpick with the point out so that I can add his nose with a little bit of piping gel underneath of it to help, again, to secure that, hold it into place. There's his little beak. Here I am adding underneath his chin. I used an upside down heart for that. I'm just using this X-Acto knife to help blend it together with the two bottoms of the hearts to make it look a bit more like one piece. And now I'm making his eyes. I'm using some black and white fondant and piping gel, which I'll use to secure them onto his face. And this is not sped up, obviously. This is in real time. So it did take time to put this together because those pieces are so tiny for his eyes. Ended up making them twice. You can see the other set of eyes in the background, and then the set that I actually used, because the first one did not turn out as good as I would have liked. And there's his eyeballs. Now for the top of the head, I did do this twice as well. The one that you see me putting on is not the one that ultimately ends up being on the chicken. So when I put this on, I used 2 toothpicks into the top of his head along with some piping gel to help hold it on. But when I pushed it down onto the toothpick initially came up through the fondant piece. So when I realized that happened, I redid it and made the fondant thicker the second time around. So you'll see that it is different this time versus what it ends up being ultimately. So I feared that would happen, so I went in and I pushed the toothpicks in separately, but that ended up not helping anyway. And now I'm cutting out the letters to say happy birthday, Amy. And over there on the plate is the second one of those red pieces that I will replace. As you see, it's removed in this frame, but that one on the plate is thicker now. And here's what he looks like with that thicker piece on his head with happy birthday, Amy, and really the finished chicken portion of this cake. I do have to go back now and work on the rest of the nest being completed. So here on the nest, you see me using some chrome luster dust mixed with lemon extract. I made that into a paint. And I'm using that to paint the wood green onto the nesting box. Painting in some knots for the natural looking of the wood and just those lines to make it look like it's made of wood. And there you can kind of see what that looks like. Of course, I did that to all 4 sides and as well as the top of the nesting box around where I cut out the place for the chicken. And here's what that looks like. So now's the part that's scary, is where I'm putting it onto the nest, and that was pretty easy. I was happy with how that went. So this is what basically she's going to look like. I'm taking a dowel and I'm hammering it in through that cake board that's underneath the chicken and down into the board of the bottom cake. So I cut off the excess of the dowel and now I'm putting some feathers over top of the hole that was created from that dowel. So you never know that it happened. Now I'm taking some of those pieces of straw that I used the extruder to create, and I'm just placing them around the chicken to hide some of the cake board that would have still been visible, and really just to make it look like she's sitting on a nesting box. And I'm using some piping gel for the areas where it's not up against the icing to help hold them into place. This is what she looks like with that little bit of straw or hay around her. Now I'm going to begin here shortly to work on the eggs that I will place on the front of this cake board. So I'm doing those by making cake pops. So here I am rolling the cake pop dough into the shape of small eggs. And I'm making 8 of those at the request of the person this cake is going to. I'm going to prepare to dip those eggs. And then once they're finished and they're dried, I will be twisting the cake pop sticks out of the eggs. And I'll just be using the eggs themselves without the stick. So now I'm beginning to use a bit of buttercream, and I'm taking that and placing them onto the front of, like in front of that nesting box. And then later there will be excess buttercream, and I'll use a toothpick to, which I may not show it in here, but I'll use that to remove some of the excess from the eggs. Yeah, here I'm doing that. Some of that then will be also hidden by additional straw that I will be placing around those eggs in front of and in between the eggs to make it look like they're resting in a nest. And I'll be using both the piping gel and the buttercream to hold those into place depending on where they're sitting. And here's our final product. This is what she looks like all finished in the nesting box with her eggs. Thank you so much for joining me as I did this. This was such a fun project. If you enjoyed this, please come back and join me for other content that I may add, and feel free to Like, comment, and share. I would appreciate it so much as a channel that is growing and just sharing my progress as I learn to be a cake decorator. Thank you, and come again.